Now let's talk about structuring, and more importantly, structuring the formation so that you could solidify essentially. So how do we do that? Well, let's take a look. This is a very interesting game that I'm going to bring that was played between Boris Gulko with white and someone named Bexton. So what happened in this game was fairly interesting indeed. Basically, white picked up to play c4, black continued with c5, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, and d5. It was interesting. d5 opens up. It is ready to give black the fundamental command in the center, which he is actually looking for. So it makes a good sense why would black would be searching for that type of move quickly. And indeed, so he's really trying fast. And then, yes, pretty much the whole idea is after white plays d4, black chose to exchange. And so now, after we retake, of course, what he really wants to do is going to be to play with knight x to the c3, b x to the c3, and g6. Clearly, the plan is that he plays with the bishop to the g7, and the pressure against the center is black's major goal. So great a question and a big query for white. How do we respond to that? Now, obviously, black is going to go bishop to the g7. He's going to be looking for a way to play knight c6. So white must maintain the integrity of his position, to keep the pawns, right, to keep the rest of the pieces too. But he must also do this very carefully so that he doesn't fall under any pressure. So after g6, d3. The important thing here is to really keep the simplicity on. The simpler you make it, the harder it's going to be for black to exploit certain drawbacks or negatives into one's position. That's why white actually can make it this way with e3. There are no immediate defects into the way in how white developed and he's setting up. And there are actually many benefits to that type of development. One of them being that white simply carries on with the easy bishop to the d3. There is going to be more things that will almost come out as good, and it's not that good for black. Actually, this is the most important reason why that works, because it's not that good. He is certainly going to have issues. He plays short castles and queen c7. Now, versus that type of formation, it is clear what black wishes to achieve will be to prep and do e5. The pawn chain is really strong for white, but he obviously needs a little more so that he can maintain it and make it even better. So white plays the move of queen e2, b6, and rook d1. As black continues with the development, white seizes the opportunity and immediately breaks open with e4. That could eventually be followed with many other moves, like say there could be a bishop to the g5 and some others. But it is the center itself that really helps out quite a lot. So take a look at that. Center is the key stage, the key area of the board where you want to focus as much of your attention as possible. Why? Because if you get a better control over the center, almost everything is going to be much better. So I seriously mean it. This is what we're looking for. With the pawns on e4, d4, c3 backing up, and even the bishop coming through on the g5 or to the g5, white has a lot to set. And in motion, those type of tactics are easy to manage. So what does black do? After the e4, he didn't have that many things to do, so he picked up to play e6, hoping to defend the d5 and keep everything ready. But okay, that didn't do anything as a sequence, because after the move e6, white plays with bishop e3 and e5, and then you get to realize the major problem of black. Not just with the fact that his dark square bishop is doing nothing on the g7. No, that's pretty apparent, but it's also the fact that that restriction, which white has already built within this till this point, is going to later help him big time with the different kinds of tactics that we can have, and that is amazing. E5, F6, of course, the most apparent natural move that black is choosing to sort of attack against our middle, and it makes sense. But it didn't matter, because then the moment black played with the move of pawn up to the F6, white can continue with e takes F and knight E5, queen G4. The idea of the strong center is never to just have it there. I mean, you can have it, but basically you'd always like to think of a way or a possibility to transform it. And so transforming it happens once that knight is up and running, and then the queen comes out. So then we have this queen going in, the bishop, like from the D3, the G6 that can be taken down as well, and everything. It is a wonderful, brilliant idea. Black picked up the exchange, takes king H8, and then D takes to D. But, I think now we go into more of the middle game, which is not that important still. You realize the advantage that white was able to get, and this is like a position which black always, the only thing that he can do is to sort of wait and stay passive or stay backward. So that's why white was so incredibly successful as the game progressed. So, what are some of the most valuable things that I'd like to point out in this game? Because the game was alright. It wasn't all that bad overall. Still, there are a few little ideas that you'd like to keep in mind. Number one, the first thing that matters actually a lot is in the beginning stage, V4, E3, and the development. It was well played and fantastic. The move of pawn to the E4, it is the move we're looking to do. White has to focus on that, because not only that it provides some amazing flexibility and freedom for the remainder of our undeveloped pieces, but that type of move by itself just grows exponentially all of white's possibilities. So now white can think very quickly about moves like bishop G5 or rook C1 or whatever, while black is still struggling to find any good positions for either of his pieces. You see, this is just a great way to do it. Not probably the most perfect or whatever, just a great way to set out the pieces, get them on the right controlling squares, and then, move from there on. So bishop, whether it's going to be bishop to the G5, queen E3, or rook C1, it's all there and it's all good for white, which is why he's taking the advantage. In terms of what black can try, I think he is obviously limited. So that's what gives white so many options. But overall, it wasn't a bad game to look at, and it's certainly interesting. Now, there is a possibility that black could attempt to force white and push towards the Tarrasch variation. It's not necessarily one of the only ways to go, but it is a possibility. And okay, how do we go about this? Okay, in fact, actually, after this, so first and foremost, after the move of C4, C5, knight F3, knight F6, and knight of the C3. Okay, so let's take a look. In fact, after continuing with the move of knight to C3, black plays E6, and then ultimately black could do it this way. So what do we do next in the position? Is there anything more? Is there anything bigger out there? And I think yes, although, what are the different options out there that can play a role? Well, black plays D5. Now this is the huge moment in the position, because by playing the move of pawn up to the D5, black is setting out to open, to give himself the freedom and the opportunity to attack. And essentially after the C takes to the D, there could be a move knight takes to the D or E takes to the D. It's pretty important. So this is a really valuable idea. After that, after the exchange, after we have the D5, C takes to the D, knight takes to the D, bishop G2, knight C6, white plays alongside D4. And then of course he castles, and knight takes D5. E takes to the D, D takes to the C5 out there. Okay, so that's a great, thing. It's not just the d5 pawn that we're going after, but also it is the fact that white can play alongside bishop f4 or queen to the d2, rook d1 will be a proper move to help out with. So it's good. Black played bishop takes the c5, bishop g5. I mean, if you really do look at most of black's pieces, you realize what the problem really happens to be. Not just the fact that he cannot develop so easily. That is a problem. But now he's created an isolated pawn, which is one of the reasons why the English opening is so good in terms of letting your opponent to mess it up first. Because if your opponent just pushes or advances quickly, then he's going to make those weaknesses or vulnerabilities that you can exploit as white. So just letting him to do it this way is what we are usually going for. So now black's got the isolated pawn, and he's having a whole lot of other problems too. Queen d7, knight e1. One of white's best versions of setting up is going to be to maneuver the knight, probably through the d3, so it can eventually reach out for f4. And so there are going to be plenty of problems, in my opinion, for black to, resolve in this position. This is white's knight moving out, black's piece is sitting on the back side, and being so much down and behind in development gives white great resource to continue. So knight e1, rook e8, knight d3. Great stuff. White's knight is actually setting up. It's making itself important by driving the black bishop, but more importantly, it has a great role. It can go to the f4 or even c5 whenever it's necessary. So now the secret, I'd say, of a good development in the English opening for white stands in the ability to regroup or think about repositioning the pieces in the right squares. There are different ways on how you can do so. However, one of the most popular ones is by reintroducing it. Like we could introduce that bishop instantly down through the b2, through the d2, so it can now go directly to the c3, and it could be really well placed. I don't think that black's got so much of an improvement like this that he can make. And even though we could say that this pawn on d5 isn't immediately so weak, it will eventually get under pressure. White doesn't get to take it, but it's always there. It is a permanent weakness like a burden. The activity of black cannot give him the only thing that he would look for as a compensation, which is an attack. And while he certainly cannot make an attack happen, white will just keep improving and regrouping and getting better with all of those pieces gradually. That's just one of the biggest problems that black would eventually have to resolve. And why that's why I think in the longer run the resources are so great. So look at the d5. You can see most of black's own forces, his bad development and everything. So after the queen b3, knight c4, and then rook a to the d1, we are perfectly set out for anything. Exchange. Rook takes the d2. In fact, black played with bishop e6, and then after that, he was tied down to a very passive defense and a lot of extra problems to worry about. It was not a great game. It was not a great position for black. So this is all I really have to admit and say about this position. It was about this game. It's an interesting way on how white really adjusted to the black, early d5 by playing d4. And again, remember that usually opening of the position in this type of scenario is really good for white, because what it will actually do, or what it usually does, is that it opens white's bishop pair. It opens up most of white's pieces that are really neat and require an open game. So it's a great thinking. Black is fairly behind and down back on development, and this is good. Castles. Then knight x to the d, capture, and knight e1. Very interesting way, but only once after we have already created the isolated pawn. So black's got plenty to worry with it, and more stuff for white to do in terms of pressure and possibilities. It's a good, really grand sequence and ideas. So these are just a couple of the major things that I'd like to mention about this, so there's not too much more to say. Let's take a look at another example. Let's see a couple more examples on how white is able to address the typical structure and make sure that its pawns and pieces will connect well together. This is a game that was played between Karpov and Topalov, and you might want to actually find it interesting on how white sets up his pieces in this game. This is quite beautiful. After c4, c5, knight f3, and d4, the sequence brings him to the Catalan approach that we were actually talking about earlier. Very good, very easy one, it looks like. So white is actually setting up for more control here. g3, bishop to the c5, and knight b3. This forces black to drive away his bishop, and as he gets to move it out of the way, white plays bishop to the g2. He's ready to take control of the d5 to keep black a little down in his development because of the possible queenside activities. And what's great about it is that after white gets to castle and he plays bishop f4, almost everything's right. The two bishops are great, the queen is going to come out, the rooks are going to follow through, and black really has plenty of problems because of that. So he can play knight h5, e3. And this is a great example of combining the best possible squares with the best possible pieces. Now white is even ready to give away, this is so big, to give away the bishop, the dark square bishop, just so that he can take back with the pawn, arrange the queen, the two rooks, and all the rest in a beautiful way. And then you could see, with this, with the resources, with the limitations that black would have to experience, it's not just a really nice idea. It is much more than that. It is beautiful, with the queen coming out and with the black pieces really, being restricted and strained and limited. White's going to set out the queen, get those rooks into the play, and continue beautifully. What I can say is just one thing: black has a lot to worry about. That's the truth. And so after e takes f, bishop to the d7 and queen to the d2, that rook is coming. The other one is going to certainly follow from behind. And then after rook to f1, rook to fe1, and rook a to the d1. Yes, the d6 is under pressure. His pieces are bad in terms of development, and there's so much more. Well, in the end of the day, after g6, h4, and h5, white tries to create another weakness. Get seemingly safer black's center is going to be put under a very severe pressure by white, and while black is quite solidly behind on that position. After h5, b5, h takes to the g, h takes to the g, and then knight c5, we can have queen takes to the d7 played out. We can have the the extra tension against e7 and a8. So it's wonderful. Again, it's just the formation. We don't need really just the the overall winning sequence. There is no winning sequence, but the white formation brings it to see what white is really looking for, what his whole strategy is about, and it is nothing else but a good shot against black's queen side. We want to keep him back there. We want to hold him under defense. And the more that's done, the more this is happening, the easier it gets for white, especially once he's prepped for a move like, say, rook to the d1, and other similar moves can happen. This is what makes the game so beautiful. Not necessarily great, but just beautiful in terms of setting up and keeping up a good tension versus black's position. So that's all I'd like to mention about this type of game. Now let's see some more examples on how strong players do all this. For example, here's a brilliant game which was played between Mihail Marin and Zoltan Almashi. This was played in the Bled Olympiad in 2002. And it was a really instructive game, so I'd like to pick up some interesting suggestions about it. After c4, c5, knight f3, knight f6, d4 exchanges, and the knight x to d4 as it happened, white really got himself into a nice position. He has the squares, the control he's able to apply. And black obviously has, enough things to be worried about. So after knight x to the d4, e6, knight c3, knight c6, and g3. Once again, that same scheme of the Maroczy bind with the idea of the white bishop really coming down and applying a good extra pressure. It is wonderful, and it is really good to see. So I wouldn't say that black's got too much or too many things to be going by. So now, what are his options? Well, his options in particular are that he might want to choose to play a queen to the b6 and eventually approach d4 knight, like keep the pressure against it or whatever. It's not working, because then white can play knight to the b3, and then we see the value. Now white's dark square bishop is going to come out very quickly, drive the black queen away, as well as the light square bishop is going to follow up too through the square of g2. So we see a very similar, and we've already seen that type of pattern in play, but we're seeing something very similar that actually works beautifully and very effectively for white. While the middle is definitely very supported, the other ideas are going to be to play bishop g2, short castles, f4 most likely would be a great idea, and it works. Black plays d6. Eventually he cannot do the move of d5, so he's got to keep it more steady, more subtle with this. And then bishop d2. Long side castles, f4 would work. Bishop e3, not a4. We now realize the great limitations that are actually being imposed into black's position. Moves like d5 can't work for him. Moves like b5 are cut off, so he doesn't get to move them. The d6 is constantly, under the severe pressure of every piece of white, and white's just intending to possibly move his queen out and go g4. Once again, the restriction, which I believe is white's best opportunity, white's best goal in this opening. Keep black down, hold him behind so that he doesn't get to play any of those breaks with d5 or b5 on its own. And this is working wonderfully great. So that's basically it. So after knight a4, black tries e5, but guess what? White just blocked it. Again, b5, without b5 and without d5 and without any of those, possible breakthroughs, there is literally no chance on how black could try to escape. And in fact, actually, after that type of a position, then you see, so in fact, after continuing with the move of, so f5, bishop to the d7, and queen c2, this, and then there was the move of knight to the b6. So wonderful move, great idea, and a terrific candidate to step on with. So I don't know if black could try or do anything differently. It's beautiful, essential, nice, and active. If you put all these things actually in place, you understand why it works out so greatly. Just no complications, nothing that black could do. Well, that is the way we really work. That is how it's supposed to follow, and that's what this is really all about. It's a great example, nice resources, everything's cool. So interesting example of the shots we can take in order to keep black down and behind. So those are my thoughts in general, just as they're supposed to follow. And again, with moves like pawn up to the g4 and everything, it just makes it really great. So let's take a look at a couple of other examples. You see, the more examples like that you get to see, the better idea you're going to have about just what this is all about, like how we can think of it. Let's take a look, and so let's see what comes out next. Now you can apply a different kind of restriction against black even when he doesn't allow you, or it seemingly may not work to go in a better way. For example, after b6, bishop to the g2, bishop to the b7, After castles, e6, knight c3 here, and then the d4 move. Okay, so we have obviously the idea of breaking in the middle. After c takes to the d, there could be a move, queen takes to the d4. I personally love the idea where we have queen takes to the d being played, because the good thing is that this queen can very easily move, but then moves like e4 and a couple others like that are going to stay. And they're not just going to stay, but they're going to be important. They're going to be strong and restrictive in their own way. So, for instance, if black plays with d6, we could actually have b3, a6, bishop a3. Karpov in this game, playing versus Sum, was playing pretty well. He developed all of his pieces on the proper lines and diagonals. And in case black played knight to the e8, white even played the move bishop to the b2. He was clear on one idea. That bishop, as well as the queen, must be continuously lined up against the opponent. Maybe we can think about e4. We could try a move like rook c1. So bishop to b2. I think that probably this was not one of the best moves by white. Having the bishop go back there, and it was rather passive. But it was okay. So e4, queen e3. And so in some way we understand really what this is all about. Once again, it's never really about anything, big or threatening or whatever. It's just, let's keep the opponent a little bit more on the downside, shall we? And as we get to do it this way, it's just, we're going to have this excellent resource limitations that will eventually keep black down. Moves like d5 he cannot make, or b5 he cannot make, really. And that's what this is all about. This is just really like the whole reason. If he is unable to play with the move of pawn up to the d5, why bother? We don't have to worry about anything else. So it was great, easy, simple, and efficient, actually. So from this point on, wherever black actually turns out to play, like say with queen to the b8, which he did, it is passive. It's bad. So white plays alongside knight d4 here and h3. The reason why h3 is so good is because it cuts off the g4. So now we can have very easy moves like f4, possibly rook to the c1, and a couple others that just fit perfectly with the position. So no, we have nothing to worry. f4, maybe e5, g4, rook d2. Again, before black is even remotely able to do a move like d5, he needs a lot of the strong preparation, and he doesn't have it. Otherwise, after the d5, we can just exchange, and then he would be losing a pawn very quickly. So that's very bad. Black played h6, f4 here, and certainly after the f4, queen to the f2. I feel like black simply did not anticipate the position quite well. It's just, yes, he doesn't have any immediate problems or any immediate worry, but the remainder of his extremely bad pieces are enough to give white a complete, full control over the position and let him try something. What, after all, black can do without d5, b5. It's a very bad position. So these are some good methods on how white can apply strong restriction in this way, thereby just keeping black down and holding him more passive. This is how it's done very well. Let's take a look at some other ways or some other variations for black.